If recent policy moves are any indication, Japan has a tourist problem. With a record number of tourists visiting the country in 2024, just under 37 million people, things are getting a little crowded. There are daily caps on the number of people allowed to climb the famous Mount Fuji or stroll the scenic streets of Kyoto. New fees are designed to limit the number of tourists, too. Beyond the sheer number of visitors, there's an increasing sense that their behavior is a problem. Japanese complain that tourists jaywalk, litter, curse, and otherwise behave in ways that are out of step with Japan's cultural norms. Officials are pushing a new framework of respectful tourism. In one famous example, local officials erected a fence in a desperate attempt to stop tourists from taking selfies with Mount Fuji in the middle of a roadway. But it's not just tourists in the crosshairs. Anti-foreigner sentiment in Japan is on the rise, with a focus on migrant workers, and even naturalized Japanese citizens who are not ethnically Japanese. The crux of the issue is something far deeper than too many tourists climbing Mount Fuji. It is a question of how Japan can keep its identity intact amid plummeting birth rates. You're watching The Diplomat Asia, your go-to source for Asia-Pacific news and analysis. In this episode, we discuss the anti-foreigner backlash in Japan, the rise of populism, and the implications for Japan's demographic crisis. Japan is a famously homogeneous society. Around 97% of people living in the country are ethnically Japanese. Out of a population of 124 million in 2024, just 3.8 million were foreigners. But while that number is small, it is rising. The population of foreign residents in Japan grew by over 10% from 2023 to 2024. And that's not an accident. Japan has one of the lowest birth rates in the world, and its population has been steadily dwindling since 2008. To bolster the population and the workforce, Japan's government has been experimenting with a more open immigration policy. Only no one calls it an immigration policy, not officially anyway.
The LDP and the Abe administration was very careful to make clear that we are not bringing in immigrants, that essentially this was a guest worker program. We're making it easier for people to come here and work, but the expectation is that they're going to return home at the end of a certain period of time.
Being ethnically Japanese is intrinsically tied up with Japanese national identity, and few politicians are willing to embrace a true immigration policy. Instead, they talk about migrant workers. The idea is to bring foreigners into the country on a purely temporary basis. According to government estimates, Japan needs 6.7 million foreign workers by 2040 to avoid a severe labor shortage. Remember, there were just 3.8 million foreigners in Japan as of 2024, so that figure needs to essentially double for Japan to avoid major economic distress due to its declining population. In 2018, under then Prime Minister Abe Shinzo, Japan passed new immigration legislation with the goal of attracting 345,000 foreign workers over the next 5 years. In 2024, Japan again amended its immigration laws to make it easier for skilled workers to gain long-term residency. But at the same time, Japan's government has cracked down on permanent migration. The 2024 amendments imposed stricter controls on permanent residency and made it easier to deport foreigners who have applied for refugee status.
It has never been easy to become Japanese. You really do have to have blood lineage. If you look like me and grew up in Japan, you're not going to be Japanese, which is very different than the American ideas. The social harmony in Japan that is predicated on Japanese nationalism and Japanese national-born identity, you can't substitute that easily.
Whether tourists or foreign workers, some Japanese increasingly see their way of life as under siege from an influx of non-Japanese. And it's not just about jaywalking or littering. After years of deflation, Japan finally made the switch to rising prices. Since October 2022, inflation has been above the Bank of Japan's official target range, and the prices of basic necessities, including rice, have been rising even faster. Rice prices hit record highs in 2025, stoking major concern among Japanese. Many blamed the price surge on increased demand from tourists. Japan's government hadn't included tourists in its calculations of rice demand, and critics alleged their consumption was a major contributor to the rising prices. Economists pointed to other factors, including Japan's dwindling population of farmers, but the narrative stuck. Foreigners were also accused of taking advantage of Japan's national healthcare system by coming to the country to receive medical care, then leaving Japanese taxpayers with the bill. That narrative was so widespread that it stoked an actual policy change. As of mid-2024, foreigners from countries that enjoy visa-free travel to Japan have to provide proof of private health insurance to be admitted to the country.
You really have had some real structural economic changes where, you've had a prolonged period of yen weakness that's resulted in tourism numbers, beyond, I think, anyone even was prepared for it. Of course, the demographic changes have been longer in coming, but post-COVID, you really have had a big jump in the foreign population, what had been sort of a steady ramp up. So you've had sort of these big social changes, economic changes kind of hitting in a pretty compressed frame of time.
As has happened elsewhere, a new political force emerged in Japan that seeks to channel this rising anti-foreigner sentiment and stoke it even more. Sunseito proudly embraces the slogan of Japanese first, amid what its founder has called a silent invasion of immigrants. Sunseito founder Kamiya Sohei managed to wed economic and social concerns by accusing the government of treating tourists and foreign residents better than Japanese citizens. Many citizens are frustrated that too much money is being spent on social security and education support for foreigners, he claimed at a press conference just ahead of the upper house election in July. Sunseito's policy platform called for restricting immigration and ending welfare payments to foreign workers. The party has called for the revival of the true Japanese spirit and an end to globalization. Kamiya claims not to oppose foreign workers in general, but says Japan needs tougher policing and regulation. He frequently accuses migrant workers of fueling a supposed crime wave and undermining Japanese identity. That echoes trends seen in populist movements around the world, including in the United States.
They've really learned from the Make America Great Again, the MAGA crowd in America, and many right-wing populist parties. Sunseito is basically copying them in Japan and having tremendous success because there's a real appetite and a hunger for a right-leaning party in Japan that the LDP used to fit and now is drifted because of more progressive and center-left leadership inside the party.
In one example, right-wing politicians have repeatedly targeted the tiny Kurdish community in Japan, accusing them of being bogus refugees and committing a disproportionate number of crimes. By all accounts, there are approximately 2,000 to 3,000 Kurds in Japan, less than 0.1% of the total population of foreign residents in the country. We are not promoting xenophobia, Kamiya insisted. Japanese people feel unease and dissatisfaction because there are no established rules for accepting foreigners. Even naturalized Japanese citizens have come under fire. Sunseito refuses to let naturalized citizens run for office under its banner, arguing that they don't have the country's best interests at heart. The party is also tapping into a right-wing conspiracy theory that claims, without any evidence, that most members of the Japanese Diet are not native to Japan. Sunseito even wants to strip first-generation naturalized citizens of the right to vote. Sunseito's rhetoric has undeniable appeal. The party shocked the nation by winning 14 seats in the upper house election in July and received over 7 million votes in the proportional ballot, the third largest tally of any party. It is also worth noting that Sunseito's attraction extends beyond the far right. Many of the party's supporters are individuals who were previously uninterested in politics, Japanese who had never voted before and had no previous interest in any particular party.
Beyond, I think, the hardcore of supporters of the party who, presumably are more bought into the whole framework, ideological framework that Kamiya has put together, they really were tapping into feeling of economic hardship, almost the forgotten people of Japan, particularly, forgotten young urban workers who've been relatively underrepresented in the political system.
Japan's long-ruling Liberal Democratic Party, the LDP, is well aware of the electoral benefits of embracing an anti-foreigner narrative. Before the upper house election in July, the Shiba Shigeru administration announced a new government task force to fight crimes and disorderly conduct by foreign nationals. The ruling party also promised a target of 0 illegal foreigners in the official campaign platform. Clearly, the LDP was hoping to head off Sunseito by co-opting part of its anti-immigration stance. But it didn't work. While Sanseito added 13 seats to its total in the upper house, the LDP lost the same number of seats and its majority. Sanseito's success, in other words, came at the LDP's expense. That left party leaders scrambling to determine how to win back the conservative voters that defected to Sanseito and other parties.
So during the LDP leadership campaign that just concluded, we clearly saw that this sort of foreign population question is now, firmly embedded on the agenda, and clearly there's a sense that the numbers have increased faster than Japan's ability to absorb them. I don't actually think there's a whole lot of political consensus, for example, like kicking out foreign nationals or, stopping the reliance on foreign workers or even stopping the reliance on tourism. I think it's more just how does this become something that's managed rather than something that just makes, Japan feel overwhelmed.
In the LDP's October 2025 leadership election, Takeichi Sanai, the most hardline conservative candidate in the race, won with widespread support from grassroots party members. During the campaign, Takeichi leaned into narratives about foreign tourists being disruptive and disrespectful, citing unconfirmed reports of foreigners kicking deer in her home prefecture of Nara. She also pledged to crack down on immigration, telling supporters that Japan's government should reconsider policies that allow in people with completely different cultures and backgrounds.
So Takaichi absolutely centered these issues in her campaign to an extent that the other candidates did, even if she wasn't necessarily offering solutions that were dramatically different. But she kicked off her campaign talking about over-tourism in her home prefecture of Nara and tourists harassing the famous deer of Nara, and really made that a centerpiece of her campaign and actually got a lot of criticism for it.
In terms of policy, Takeichi has proposed creating a new command center for foreigner-related issues to be overseen by the Prime Minister herself. That might seem like overkill. Remember, foreigners account for less than 3% of Japan's overall population, but Takeichi insisted, "I wanted to show that I am taking the public's concerns seriously." Upstart far-right parties like Sanseito have a long history of emerging and quickly flaming out in Japan. But the LDP is very good at moving just far enough to the right to reassert its dominance over Japanese conservative politics. That's already happening this time as well.
What Sanseito has done is made it abundantly clear that the LDP needs to be more conservative. And when you saw the 5 candidates running for the LDP president, they all mimicked in many ways the anti-foreign and anti-immigrant sentiment. I think Prime Minister Takaichi really means that the LDP is shoring up its right-wing and conservative credentials. She won because of her conservative and populist appeal. And I think in many ways, she has a better chance of bringing the conservative movement back into the LDP and finding friends on the right. When it comes to immigration policy, when it comes to Japan's global role, we should expect a more assertive, more nationalistic Japan that is less hospitable and less friendly to immigrants who break the law, and very similar to what MAGA and the President Trump have done here, really targeting illegal immigration.
But the LDP's efforts can only go so far. Takeichi is a controversial figure precisely because of her far-right leanings. A hard pivot in that direction risks losing support from moderates. Beyond politics, there's the hard truth of demographics to consider. The LDP has long spoken about the importance of increasing migrant worker numbers, and it was responsible for amending immigration rules in both 2018 and 2024. Takeichi herself clarified in an interview with the Asahi Shimbun that she wants to make sure foreigners in Japan, whether tourists or long-term residents, respect rules. This is not about xenophobia or exclusion, she said. Of course, campaign trail promises do not always make it into actual policy. With Japan's native-born population dwindling, the LDP continues to believe that foreign workers are necessary.
It's really the result of the long-term decline of the overall population, and with that, then the aging of the population. And so you really have extraordinary demand, particularly for service sector employees. There's just a widespread labor market shortages. You've had an uptick in bankruptcies as a result of firms that just haven't been able to find workers. And so, of course, corporate Japan has been very interested in having access to a population of foreign workers.
AI and robotics are a potential long-term solution, but for now, big business desperately needs more labor. The worker shortage is getting serious, and foreign workers are the most obvious solution. The LDP has long held that both new technology and overseas labor are necessary, and most Japanese agree. In a May 2024 survey, 62% of Japanese respondents supported increasing the number of skilled foreign workers in the country. In the business sector, support is even higher. A survey published in late September 2025 found that over 97% of Japan's business leaders agree with the government's policy to expand acceptance of foreign workers.
I don't think the public is necessarily xenophobic. I don't think they're necessarily hostile. I mean, I would be hesitant to even call it anti-foreigner sentiment in most cases. If you look at exit polls, most people who voted in the upper house elections, this was not a high priority issue for them. They were much more concerned about the more direct, issue being the rising cost of living and, the state of the economy. It was relatively low ranked, except among supporters of Sanseito's. But that's still a relatively small share of the electorate and of the public. I mean, I don't think everyone woke up and became xenophobic. I mean, there are other things going on here that led to the outcomes that we've seen.
But it's clear that Japan's embrace of foreign workers has hard limits. Remember, even the LDP itself refuses to talk about an immigration policy. From the LDP's perspective, the goal is to import a temporary workforce of skilled laborers from abroad, not to welcome an influx of permanent residents or naturalized citizens. The problem for the LDP is that its push to promote the foreign workforce has now become a political problem. Sanseito and other right-wing parties are criticizing the government for supposedly favoring foreigners over Japanese, and now concerns over foreign workers are bleeding into Japan's approach to tourism as well. In both cases, the proposed solution is tighter regulations on who can enter Japan and stricter oversight of behavior while in the country. It's important to remember that this is not the first time far-right politicians have stoked anti-immigrant sentiment in Japan. The late Ishihara Shintaro, who served as governor of Tokyo from 1999 to 2012, was famous for it. He accused foreigners of having repeatedly committed heinous crimes and claimed they were likely to riot. He also claimed that illegal immigrants had overrun Japan and turned parts of Tokyo, such as the famous Shinjuku, into crime-ridden areas that even crime bosses were afraid to enter. If that sounds familiar, it should. Not only Sanseito, but Donald Trump and populists around the world have used similar rhetoric accusing foreigners of crime and undermining the dominant culture. Only Ishihara was speaking in 2000, a full 25 years ago, and his comments had little real impact on policy as Japan continued its efforts to attract foreign workers.
I do actually think the demographic question in Japan is driving this because, more and more people are trying to figure out what's in it for us. It's become kind of the Trojan horse for some other bigger questions about Japan's global role, about Japan's economy, about demographic questions. The immigration question just becomes the flashpoint. The demographic question has been one that's plagued Japan for a while. I do think Japan has the ability to take a hard line on immigration. And in fact, I would expect it because that's what the population is calling for.
Now, the most extreme policy proposals, such as stripping naturalized citizens of their citizenship, remain on the fringe. With a more conservative prime minister in office, the LDP may attempt to co-opt rivals like Sanseito by taking a harder line on foreigners in Japan, but don't expect radical changes in line with Donald Trump's mass deportations in the United States. Japan needs foreign workers to keep its economy afloat, and the government knows it. Thanks for watching The Diplomat Asia. Now you know all about what's driving the backlash against tourists and migrants in Japan. If you're enjoying our content, visit thediplomat.com for comprehensive coverage of Asia-Pacific geopolitics. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth information on major events and trends in the Asia-Pacific region. Leave a comment below if there's a topic you'd like to see covered by The Diplomat.